So let's talk about Night People. This is your latest album, which is coming out on February 3rd through
Yeah.
Rotten to the Core Records and To Live a Lie Records.
Yes.
Would this be your third album or your third full length?
Yeah. Third full length. We've done a bunch of splits and EPs and stuff, but this is our third LP.
So when did you actually start working on this?
I typically try and write music so that we're staggering releases, meaning that the first LP came out, and by the time we were touring, I was already writing the songs for the second LP. That way, by the time our whole support, let's say year of supporting the first record has been done, we're recording the next one just so that we're always have something current going on. I think I was writing these songs in 2019. I seem to remember telling the band about some of the new stuff that I was writing when we were in the East Coast on our Maryland Death Fest tour. And yeah, that was 2019. So started kind of putting these songs together back then, and the pandemic kind of slowed some aspects of it down. So yeah, it's been in the making for some time.
The pandemic just slowed the parts where you could actually get together with your band, right?
Yeah. I live exactly. I live 4 states away, so that makes kind of a complication too. So what ended up happening was I flew the guitar player and the drummer down here. One of the guitar players, Chris, and the drummer Brian down to my house in Arizona, where I have a studio in my home, and we tracked all of the songs and then sent it to our other guitar player, Sam, and he tracked the stuff, his guitar parts on his own. We were never in the same room ever throughout the entire creation of Night People. So that alone, knowing that, I mean, to me, that's a kind of a proud moment for me. Just that I play with guys that are committed enough and they're good enough at what they do that we were never all in the same location, and it still turned out the way that it did. So it's pretty cool.
How would you compare Night People to your previous albums? What would you say makes this one different?
This one's a little different because it's more pissed. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's got more like it's got more furious riffs going on in that it's just they're not real intricate riffs in any way. They're pretty primal sounding. I don't know. It's a little less moody. It's more just one mood. It's just always out to get you. Whereas the other albums, they'd have these kind of, I don't want to say mysterious parts, but just parts that had a little more texture and stuff to them. And this album, another thing that really makes this album a little more pissed sounding is Brian's drumming. He did a lot of this stuff all single foot blasts, which I don't know if people really nerd out on this so much, but
Oh, believe me, this podcast is all about nerding out about blast beats.
yeah. So just over the years, I've really kind of locked in with this idea that I really don't want to play a lot of riffs that are faster than my drummer can play single foot blasts, because they just become they become so fast that it just sounds like a blur. I want there to be chunk to the riff, and Brian, he really kind of embraced that when I told him that, and that's kind of what I was looking for in these songs, and he laid into that hard, and I think that it just made the songs just more like vicious sounding. Every song I don't really know. There's a lot of songs that are over 2 minutes, aside from the very last song, because it's a closer, but they're just, I don't know. They're in and they're out. And when I listen to them, it makes me want to just fight somebody. And that's it. That's what I want. I want it to be not like jock hardcore or something. It's just like evokes an emotion for me as the writer, which is I just want to destroy something. Whereas the other records, they were kind of they would go in different directions. They're a little more dynamic, I guess, in a way. This one's just it's always mad all the time. And that's how I felt when I wrote the song. So mission accomplished.
So as you mentioned, you recorded the album yourself. Do you have your own studio?
Yeah, I don't really call it a studio because I don't know what I'm doing. I just turn knobs till things sound good. But yes, I've been since the pandemic kind of inspired me with all of my bands to just take a hand at recording, because if I can get it at least demo quality good enough, then that can really help, especially that I live so far away from the Endorphins guys. If I could utilize that much, then it would be worth it. But it's exceeding my expectations. I've learned a lot, and I'm feeling more confident about recording.
It's interesting. I spoke to a band a couple days ago who expressed something similar, where one of the members had a studio or at least a home recording setup, and they recorded basically temp tracks, like the demos for the album,
Yeah.
and listened back to them, and they're like, we could actually just release this, and the record company was stoked on it, and so they just kind of went with that version. I think that's something that I'm hearing about or seeing happen more and more often. It's definitely a benefit to having a band member who has either like a basement recording studio or like his own setup where you can track things.
Well, there's something to be said about it. For me, it's a point of pride that I can listen to a record if it sounds good, especially, and go, I not only wrote this stuff, I recorded it too. It's cool. And it just kind of leans back into the DIY ethos. Just figure out how to do it to where it sounds like you. If you're the engineer, it's going to sound like how you want it to sound.
Yeah.
Now, granted this record, I didn't mix this record. I sent it to our friend Greg Wilkinson at Earhammer in Oakland to mix it. But oh boy, that's the next step. Take on the monster task of trying to mix this stuff and make it sound huge.
And that's a point I made on this podcast before, which is, a lot of the times when you're hearing a finished album, what you're actually hearing is, the studio or the engineers or the guy who mixed it and mastered it. That's their art, that's their expertise.
Right.
When you hear like a demo or even like a rehearsal room recording, that's the band. That's how they actually sound.
Yeah, and in this kind of music, that's what everybody always remembers, right? Oh yeah, that first demo, or whatever, that first EP rips. The LP's cool, it's more polished, but what do you go back to? Often 9 times out of 10, people I talk to, they go back to the early stuff, the more raw stuff. And I would agree with that. That's what you're going to get live. It's not going to be polished, not with a punk band. I mean, not at Room AP, not in some basement. It's gonna sound like fucking Vietnam. It's gonna sound insane.
I mean, all due respect to the guys at Rumapi, but do you remember what their soundboard was? I think there were 4 mixers on it.
Jeez. Oh my God. Yeah, I just was glad that I wasn't getting electrocuted or something from bad wiring.
Yeah, when you're playing squats and DIY shows, there isn't a lot of like front of house action going on.
Yeah.
You basically just you get what you get.
Right. Well, and then when you're a band that just lives within that world, it's really weird when you have to play a hi-fi club, and you go, okay, well, what do you want in your monitors? I never trust monitors to ever even work. So I don't know. I'm lost. I don't know what I want. I want to just play. Don't ask me. Just, make it sound good.
So I do need to correct myself a little bit, just because I'm going to get some heat from this. For the festival that you guys played,
Yeah.
Chaos at Rumapi, I do know that those guys hired an outside PA. Our friend Tom, who also is an engineer and has his own studio, he brings over a lot of expensive equipment so that the band sound good during the festival. But normally, it's our friend Sita who has this very small mixing desk, which only has about 4 or 5 mixers on it.
Right. Well, and I will say I recall from that, and there's actually video on YouTube of that. show. I recall being able to play with no sonic issues, and watching the YouTube video. It sounds like falling bombs, but it's not in any part because of the sound production. It's just the music in kind of a cavernous room. It just sounds loud and whatever. But yeah, it was cool. Our experience there was fantastic. No issues.